Okay, so we're continuing on our exploration of Photoshop here. The uh, layers we're going to be working with a bit when we do the assignment information and tutorial, so I'm going to skip over this one for now. We're going to move past type because it's not required much at all for the assignments, and we work with type extensively in Illustrator, where that's where you should be dealing with type, as well as in InDesign. The select all area, there's not a lot to talk about for these ones. You can select all as you think you already know, and from there you can copy, paste, etc. You can also deselect. I use this one quite often. One quick little thing though, if you're using the marquee tool for any reason and you have an area selected that you would like, you can always copy that. That makes sense. You just go to edit, copy, and then you can paste that particular piece, and then you can see here that that's what you would have. But what happens if you actually want the area around a selection? It's a little bit trickier to select other things. So for that one, you can go to select inverse, and then when I would hit copy on that and paste, oops, it looks like I forgot to do the copy correctly. I did copy, but I was on the wrong layer. So I'm back on the background layer, and I'm hitting copy. And then when I do the paste, then you can see I got that instead. So it's probably rare that you're using the inverse, but you certainly can. Moving over to filters, I have a strong word of caution when it comes to filters. Just know that every single person who has access to Photoshop has access to all of these different filters. Now, some of them are very big no-nos in terms of design, just because they're, number one, everybody knows where you got them. Number two, they're not that impressive. Some of them are going to be effective in small ways. Certainly, for example, a blurring of something could be quite effective, and you can change how blurry something there are certainly reasons and times where you might be using something like that. So spend some time looking through them if you feel like you might benefit, but these are not requirements. And then occasionally sharpen is useful if you need to get something a little bit more sharp. Unsharp mask seems like the opposite of what you wanted to do, but you can go there and sharpen something should you want to. Stylize, these ones are especially probably a little bit more dangerous in terms of usage, just because they're red flags in terms of, we know it's an amateur probably using it. Now you won't probably care for these assignments, but out in the design world you'd want to stay away from these for the most part. But the blurs, yes, I can see using those ones. Distort, occasionally you might want to use them. I'll just grab a new layer for that one, turn this one on, and then if you go to something like, oh, I just lost it, where was it? Pixelate, sharpen, distort. Some of these are kind of silly, basically. Like this one, you can get more of a sphere. So as I punch in, I'm going to just go crazy so you can kind of see it a little bit more. It's shifting the things around. It's possible that in the future you could use this. But I do use some of these ones up above here. Most specifically, I use the lens correction. Most cameras will add a little bit of a bowing to your images, and so if that's the case and you don't like it, you can go over here to custom and do some adjustments here. Basically, you can remove a little bit of distortion. Here I'm going to exaggerate it a lot so you can see what it's doing. And here you would punch it out just a little bit if you were wanting to get more of a fisheye effect. So it can also fix colors. I don't generally fix colors here. Another thing you can do is you could try to do a vignette. Here, the vignettes are starting from the outer edges, so let me try that one from this image instead. I just unlocked it so I can actually edit it. And so again, if we go here, you might be able to see the vignette a little bit better. So, it's whitening the edges. Here it'll darken your edges. So sometimes that's kind of an effective look. You can also fake that in other ways, which we'll probably show at some point. Sometimes too, you might need an image to feel like it's coming at you a little bit more. It might not be as effective for this particular one. but feel free to experiment with those if you want to. We're not going to do anything with 3D, so I'm going to skip over that. That's its own special time. You got to spend some time on that one. And then the view, you'll definitely find yourself needing to zoom in and out of the screen quite a bit. That's totally fine. I generally don't need to use any of these up here, but you, of course, can do the zoom in, as I mentioned before, Command plus and minus. You can also fit it on screen, so if it's, let's say that you're way out here and you want to see it bigger, rather than trying to zoom in, you can simply fit on screen. You can do 100%, 200%, etc. You can also do print size. This sometimes might help people to understand what size it actually would get if it was going to be printed. Though these can be deceptive in terms of inches and all that. Like this, as you can see, that is not on my screen. That says it's an inch. There's no way that that's an actual inch. That's more like barely a third of an inch. So I don't trust that view. Depends on what size screen you're on and what resolution you've set your monitor at to know that that's for sure. Screen mode, you can switch it in and out of full screen mode if you wish to. Extras, I don't really know that you need to worry about that. Show, sometimes you can see if you've got some things you're trying to line up, you can have a grid go on and off. And rulers, you can see my rulers are already up. You can turn those on and off. The other thing that's helpful, you saw me do it briefly, but these guides are very nice in terms of lining things up. So you might find yourself dragging these guides. You just click over on your ruler, hold down, and then drag. So you can divide things, you can align things. It is quite helpful, especially when you're doing more like design things rather than just a simple photograph. You probably won't need it for that. Although sometimes you might want to make a horizon line truly horizontal, and that's something that you would want to use them for. Once you have guides, you can lock them, you can clear them, you can snap to them, which means if I start making something near these, if I'm over here, let me go in a little bit quicker so you can see that better. Oops, didn't mean to erase that. So even though I'm going to click out here, if I'm far away out, it will want to directly snap to them. So even though in this one, I'm over here, that's fine. The closer I get, see there, it just, even though I clicked out a little bit further from it, it immediately snapped to the edge. So it's, sometimes you might want that, sometimes you might want to take it off, sometimes it's troublesome. But between all these things, you can do a lot of alignment rather than guessing. Sometimes guessing is fine though. Over to window, just as a review, if you have a lot of files open, you can choose to show them all together. Let me open up a couple files here so you can see that at play. Alright, so I have obviously quite a few images up here. Now if I was to tell these to tile all vertically, it's going to show slivers of them, which sometimes is helpful. You can tile all of them horizontally. The larger the monitor, the easier, of course, some of these things become. 2 up horizontal, it's just showing a couple of them, well, horizontally. And then I'm not going to go through all of these ones. And then finally consolidate to tabs. Actually, I'll do 6 up so you can see what that looks like too sometimes. That's going to be helpful. And then you can also float other windows. Let's see. Float in window. So this is called floating. And these can get a little troublesome because if you forget about it and you switch to a different file, sometimes they can get lost. And technically, it's still there, it's just hiding. So if you lose them, a quick way to get them all back would be to simply do the consolidate all to tabs and then you got it. If you do have one that's floating, you can grab the top of them and you can actually redeposit them as a tab up there. If you still can find it, and then you're welcome to work with it that way. Moving down to the workspace, again, depending on what your area of interest is, you might switch back and forth between these. I usually tend to stick to default, but some of them you'll like for painting, you're going to have more different things up, like your brush presets will be up, and your colors, of course, will be visible. So just depends. You might find your own mix and just set it like that for your own self every time. The other things are basically if you can't see them where you normally see them, I'm going to reset the essentials again, then you might need to just bring them up manually with here under the window and just simply click on the ones that you wish to see in case they have disappeared and you're not used to the icons yet. So that is a very brief look at some of the leftovers of the menu areas. And now for the next one, I'll be probably looking at the layers.